question that keeps coming up various places about relationships. What is
like romantic relationships?
Romantic relationships, intimate relationships. So we're not all relationships are bad.
Well, it depends from what point of view you look at it.
But passionate, intimate, sexual, romantic relationships. Is that good or bad?
Right. Well, depends on what your goals are.
Feels nice.
Depends on what your goals are. Feeling nice might be bad.
But if that's your goal.
Exactly. Well, exactly. If that's your goal, then it's not bad for you. But so you have to recognize then what do you want from your life. Do you want to find a relationship, invest effort in it, develop it, cultivate it, or do you want to practice the Dhamma? So if you don't want to practice Dhamma, or if you only want to practice Dhamma partially, then it's not correct to say that relationships are bad, because you wouldn't see that. But you cannot expect then, so my relationships are not bad, but I can still practice the Dhamma. You have to recognize they're mutually exclusive.
But should you not cultivate any?
Should you not practice the Dhamma? That's then the question. And that's up to you. Like, up to everyone individually. If you want to practice the Dhamma, then yes. Relationships are unwholesome. They are the opposite of that goal. If you don't want to practice the Dhamma, then it doesn't matter what I say.
But if you practice the Dhamma and then you don't cultivate relationships, then you'll be lonely and suffer.
Yeah, but at least you try to practice Dhamma.
Yeah.
You can't have it all.
Yeah.
So you either choose the worldly goals, or you choose to overcome the world, in which case means you cannot invest the same effort in the worldly goals. It's sort of contradicting each other. So the question really, it's not a right question to say, are relationships bad? It's more like, should we all practice the Dhamma or not? Or should I practice the Dhamma or not? If the answer is yes, then you got your answers for all the relationships, sexual or otherwise. They are bad. Because they're against the principle of Dhamma. So if you know you want to practice Dhamma, but now wonder why a relationship bad against the point of view of the Dhamma, well, the answer is you cannot have a relationship, you cannot have intimacy without desire. You cannot have desire without lust. And Dhamma is freedom from lust, freedom from desire, freedom from intimacy, freedom from depending on anything external. So, and can you have a relationship with others non-externally? Impossible. Can you have a relationship with others without having desire towards them? Impossible. Can you have a relationship, sexual or otherwise, without lust towards their form? Externally? Impossible. I mean, even ask yourself, can you be in love with somebody without being physically as well, having lust towards their form? Doesn't matter if their form is beautiful or ugly. What matters is you want that form. Could you have desire and lust towards the opposite sex, for example, if their form does not exist? Inconceivable. You can try to be in love with the idea, but even then that idea assumes a certain form, which is how you find that idea in others when you fall in love and so on. Because you already carry that framework, template of this is what I value, and then you recognize it embodied in others. But it has to be external, which means it has to require infatuation, lust and desire. Because Dhamma can only be practiced in solitude. There is no group practice. And whenever the Buddha was, numerous suttas, just take a pick, exhorting monks to go in solitude and be alone, physically alone, dwell most of the time in solitude, not in company, even if it's company of other like-minded people. Company is company. So, can you have a relationship without company? Impossible. Which means if you have a relationship, you can't practice the Dhamma.
And that's saying that where there is intimacy, lust will
Finds
find
the
an
opening. Yeah.
And it comes from a really intense sutta. But
Can you have intimacy without company? So if there's no company, no room for intimacy.
Yeah.
If there is no intimacy, how can there be lust arising? So why are relationships bad from the Dhamma point of view? It's because they require company.
Intimacy.
No, company.
Right.
Which results in intimacy, which results in lust.
Yeah.
So even if you live withdrawn from relationships, if you cultivate a relationship mentally and wish for it, or refuse to give it up, you are living in company. You are living in intimacy. So yeah, that's why they're bad. Everything else that can come out of that relationship, good or bad, is secondary. Because all of that is founded upon the fact that it requires company of others.
But there is obviously, if you want to live a worldly life, then there are ways to cultivate good relationships.
Of course, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah. So it's not.
So you can't, those are two different things. So you can't use two different things to extrapolate the context that would then apply to both, because they're mutually exclusive. So if you don't want to practice the Dhamma, then the statement that all relationships are bad because they require company does not apply to you, because you don't want to practice for arahantship. But that also means that disqualifies you from talking about practice towards arahantship, from talking about Dhamma. And that's really the problem. Like same like when people like, a lay life or a monk. It's not about that. Doesn't matter if you're a lay person or you're a monk, whether you're in relationships or not. What matters is whether you took practice of Dhamma as your goal. If so, then it doesn't matter whether you wear robes or not. What matters is whether you pursue sensuality or not. And if the goal of Dhamma is taken up, pursuit of sensuality has to be abandoned. Again, doesn't matter whether you're a layman or not. So that's where things are rooted. But the problem, or rather the worst thing, is the view that I've taken the Dhamma, but then at the same time assume that you can still engage with sensuality and company and so on, which are two mutually, because you're a layman.
Yeah.
No. Being a layman does not mean not being celibate. If being a layman means not being a celibate, then basically if you become a celibate even without wearing a robe, you are not a layman. And that's absolutely fine. You can regard yourself like that. That's why the Buddha used the word Arya Sangha even for ordained or non-ordained people, but people with the right view or more. People who have overcome Attavada, sensuality and so on. And they were not ordained, yet they were the Sangha of that kind. But he did not use that to include people who were sensual, people who are not practicing towards Dhamma, people who don't have the right view. Nobody shorter than Sotapanna belongs to, Dhammanusari, Sadhanusari, they belong to Arya Sangha as well, which is the Sotapanna without still quite realizing the fruit of it.
So, a sign that you are practicing for intimacy is something, I don't know, I've got this thought, that if you are trying to get personal with someone.
Well, it's intimate.
Yeah. So
can you get personal with someone without that someone? Impossible. So you're already seeking things out externally, even if you don't find them.
But that is regarded in many Buddhist circles as a kind of practice, is kind of developing this special friendship, deep,
personal, intimate
friendship.
Yeah, because they don't really know where the practice is.
And that intimacy opens you up, opens the other person up
to lust.
To lust eventually.
It's same in Christianity. In the Christian mysticism, basically you develop relationship with God. with your imaginary friend. You develop a full-on relationship of love and devotion. So the only reason that relationship does not become lustful is because the form of the other does not exist. So it remains left hollow, basically. But the attitude is still there, the same. Emotional. Infatuated. Dependent. So you have to recognize that Dhamma is against all of that. Practice of Dhamma. So if you do recognize that, then you realize that the other views, the values towards relationship, towards company, towards sensuality. Sensuality is a form of company, as the Buddha said. All of those relationships are contradictory with the goal that you value. So you can then choose to ignore that contradiction and then feel qualified in talking about practicing towards arahantship and not even being celibate. Or you cannot ignore that these two things contradict and then make the effort to be celibate and develop that which you yourself value more, freedom from suffering. So the worst thing is to develop the view that will ignore the contradiction of your own existence. I value freedom from suffering, but I'm also not celibate. I value freedom from suffering, full transparency, undoing of my being, abandoning all the asavas, kilesas. Oh, but I also love company of others. Those are plain contradictions. And so should we all abandon the world and practice for arahantship? That's not up to you. Do whatever you want to do. But if you do, you have to abandon the world.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it, that's fine. It's on you. Your actions, your results. But don't try to kind of ignore the contradiction and then sort of refabricate and try to justify that you don't have to abandon the world and you can still practice for the freedom of the world. Freedom of yourself from the world. Well, that's a contradiction in terms.
It's a simile of the saw. And one of the sections, the first section, there's a monk called Paguna, and he was entangled with the nuns. So he was quite intimate with the nuns. If any monk spoke in dispraise of those nuns in his presence...
So he was still a proper monk, so which means he was still keeping the rules.
Yeah.
So he wasn't physical with those nuns or anything else.
Yeah. He was just intimate with them. So
he was intimate. He was
personal,
friendly,
yeah.
Having friendship and so on.
So nothing sexual, overtly.
No, because that would have been mentioned.
Yeah. So he was just entangled, intimate with them, so to speak. If any other monk spoke in dispraise of the nuns in his presence, he would be angered and displeased and would make an issue out of it. And if any monk spoke in dispraise of him in the presence of the nuns, they would be angered, displeased, and would make an issue out of it. That's how much he was spending time entangled with the nuns.
Yeah.
So
could that entanglement arise if he didn't spend time with them?
Yeah. Could that displeasure?
Could then everything else that arose from the entanglement arise if he did not spend time in their company? Impossible. And by the way, they were all very like-minded. I mean, they were so like-minded, I bet they clicked right away. Same values, same goals, monk, nun, same.
I'm celibate, you celibate,
exactly.
we're perfect for each other.
Exactly. It's the company that is the problem. Because often people try to justify the company on account of a greater goal and greater purpose that we all partake in. Oh, let's all come and sit together in this meditation.
Yeah. So that through that attachment, aversion is born.
Of course. Yeah.
If someone tries to hurt those nuns,
you will not be able to be indifferent.
So then the Buddha went to speak to him, says, "Come." And so the Buddha questions him, "Is it true, Paguna, that you are spending too much time with the nuns?" And
Well, what is
They
time
spend-
anyway?
Spending too much time with you, basically. He says, yes, Lord. He says, aren't you a clansman who has gone forth from the home life into homelessness out of conviction?
Exactly. Aren't you the one
Yeah.
who has abandoned your whole previous life on account of valuing Dhamma and freedom from suffering, which requires freedom from company and intimacy?
Mm.
Aren't you the one who already realized that that's valuable, hence you're a monk now? Yes, I am. And yet you're doing the contradictory things now to your own values.
Yeah. Yes, he says it's not fitting for you.
It's not fitting. It does not fit the values you took upon yourself. If you were not a clansman who has abandoned his lay life and became a monk, I don't care. Do what you like.
But it's not right. That's why
Exactly.
he's telling him.
That's why it's not right.
He says, so if anyone speaks in dispraise of the nuns in your presence, even then you should abandon any desire related to the household life and any thoughts related to the household life. And even then you should train yourself. My mind will be unaffected and I will say no evil words. I will remain sympathetic to that person's welfare.
I will not lose the framework of non-ill will,
That's what it says.
dispassion, and so on.
If anyone hurts those nuns with a stone or a hand or a rod or a knife in your presence, right there you should abandon any desire, and says the same thing. Abandon all ill will towards those people.
Exactly.
If anyone should speak in dispraise of you in your presence, even then you should abandon desires. If anyone gives you a hit with a hand or a stone or a rod or a knife,
You should not.
abandon all desires.
Let alone what to be said for other people.
Yeah.
Cultivating that for others. So the criteria then is not whether you're a layman or a monk. The criteria is whether you want to practice Dhamma or not.
Should I be doing this?
That's what so should lay people be celibate? Yes, if they want to practice Dhamma for arahantship. If they say, well, I don't want to practice Dhamma for arahantship, fine. But then you're not going to get to talk about Dhamma of arahantship. Because you refuse to practice on that level by refusing to be celibate. As simple as that.
Yeah,
But I want to have a view of practicing towards arahantship and at the same time do the opposite of the requirement for practice for arahantship. Well, that's why you're a living contradiction. And you don't want to be, and you find for yourself, wait, am I a contradiction to my own values? That's what the Buddha asking. Aren't you the man who left his whole life on account of these values? So why are you contradicting them? They don't fit your own values. It's okay. They do not fit your own values. And you realize, the only way you're contradicting yourself is because you ignore or you turn a blind eye to the extent of your own values. And that's the worst thing. By turning a blind eye, you develop a view that you can have both. I am qualified to talk about arahantship and practice toward arahantship, and I also don't have to be celibate. And deep down, if you look at it closely, you already know it's a contradiction in terms.
But I just want to have everything go my own way. If I believe...
Well, it's not even that rational. It's more like, no, I just don't want to expose myself to any form of discomfort. So I just always go with the path of least resistance on the emotional kind. Because it's going to cause some friction internally if you recognize that your values contradict things you want to do. I need to practice sense restraint now because it contradicts the values. And that is unpleasant. So I could either endure that discomfort and grow out of it, or I can ignore or try to remold my values to allow me to engage in things I want to do guilt-free. It always comes down to that. Always. So if layperson means sensuality, relationship, company, Dhamma does not apply to you.
Right.
But if a layperson gives up dependence on company, intimacy, lust, relationship, sensuality, Dhamma applies to you. You partake in the noble Sangha. But you can't have it both ways. Despite what contemporary sort of teachings that you selectively pick up might tell you. Read the suttas and you'll see for yourself. Because you have people these days say, you can be arahant and have sexual intercourse.
You can have unpleasant desire and be free from suffering.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Towards that.
You can feel the desire and be free from desire at the same time. That's pretty much what they're saying. Being free from desire, you can engage with all desires. How does that work?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Only to the one who is not free from desire.
Yeah.
If you have an inkling of freedom from desire, you realize actually even that does not sound good. Yeah, and there was that other sutta, similar. Actually, that wasn't necessarily in the context of practicing Dhamma, it was just in the context why intimacy is unwholesome. Because it makes you dependable on even a greater extent of things that are not in your control. Same, love for children, your spouse. If something happens to them, you cannot not be affected.
Yeah.
So you recognize that, this is a liability. Like, I'm already liable to all this suffering simply on account of my own existence, let alone incorporating existence of others into my own dependence, into my own existence. That makes you really, really... That's why the children are the greatest source of suffering, as the Buddha said. Because if something happens to your child, there's no way you'll be equanimous. There's no way. And the sutta I'm thinking of was that when he gives the example why intimacy and love is cause of suffering, was the man in love with a woman, infatuated, having lust towards her, and he asked the monks, wouldn't that, like, if that man were to see that woman laughing and giggling with another man, would he suffer on account of that sight? He's like, yes, of course. Why? Because his mind is bound with her form by lust, infatuation, and now that form is basically given to somebody else, at least in his mind, as in he has no control over it.
Yeah.
It's extreme displeasure, not because of what she's doing, but because of he's bound with her that requires certain behavior that she's now going against. Yeah. And says, if that man has wisdom, he will reflect thus. He would say, my mind is bound by infatuation and lust, love towards that woman. That's why when I see her with another man, I experience extreme pain and suffering. What if I were to undo that lust and aversion, lust and infatuation towards that woman? Then he sets himself upon not cultivating that lust, not welcoming that infatuation, not clinging to it, basically allowing it to endure, but basically overcoming it, not fueling it anymore. And then later on another occasion, he doesn't have lust and infatuation with that woman, and if he were to see that woman laughing and giggling, would he experience pain and suffering? No, because there's nothing binding him to that form, nothing requiring a certain set of behavior of that form. Thus, suffering cannot arise. Same, could you suffer on account of losing a child if you don't have a child? Impossible. If you have a child, could you theoretically overcome any attachment towards a child? Yes. If you were to overcome the slightest attachment, slightest infatuation, slightest love towards your own child, could you suffer on account of anything happening to that child? Impossible. So you have a choice. You'll ignore that possibility of development and cultivate the intimacy, maintain it, ignore it, which is a form of maintaining it already, but then you make yourself liable to anything wholesome or unwholesome that can affect you.
Yeah, so why don't I suffer when other children die or other people's mothers
Well, there
die?
was that sutta where the Buddha was sitting in the forest with the monks and he said, monks, would you be upset if people come in now in this woodland where we're sitting and start collecting these twigs and branches and burning them and breaking them? What? No, we wouldn't be upset. Why would we be upset? Who cares about these discarded branches? That's how you should regard your own body, your own life. Let alone body of others and which are already secondary to your point of view. Literally, like discarded twigs and branches. That's how you need to regard your whole experience as a whole. And that's how we'll experience dispassion towards that.
So that's attachment to others and other things. You're exposing yourself so much more to suffering. You're just expanding your exposure.
Well, also, exactly. You cannot be attached, in love, infatuated with others without ignoring your own existence to that extent. Without ignoring your own liability Like your own existence makes you liable to suffering on account of things you're not in control of. You need to ignore that in order to allow yourself to proliferate far enough to actually incorporate others in your love and infatuation.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to become infatuated and in love if you don't forget the context of your own existence, which is a perilous situation. So you need to be repetitively ignoring your own nature of your own situation, which is impermanent and suffering, in order to basically establish your mind upon other people.
I remember someone saying that he was practicing metta for many, many years.
Mm.
Metta in the traditional sense.
Mm.
And but when he had a child, that just went right out the window, because it was when the child was bullied at school.
Oh,
He wanted to just
Sure.
destroy the other children,
Yeah.
you know.
yeah. Yep, because
Just
if
do
you
that.
were to practice metta, you wouldn't have been engaging
You'd be in love.
in acts of love, lust,
Yes.
sensuality and everything else. Because all of that means acting out of how you feel. And if you act out of how you feel, means you're not equanimous towards what you feel. So there's no metta, there's no framework.
Yeah. He was practicing the wrong type of metta, actually.
Which really isn't metta.
Yeah.